Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. You're getting ready for an interview as an import-export specialist in clothing and footwear, which sounds super interesting.
Yeah, it's a really cool field.
And you've brought some great resources from RoleCatcher. So we're going to deep dive into those today to help you ace that interview.
All right, let's do it.
So you've got the RoleCatcher Career Guide and some sample interview questions. Let's kick things off with the Career Guide. It describes an import-export specialist as the vital link between overseas manufacturers and local retailers. What jumps out at you from that?
Well, I think it shows how important this role is, especially in today's global fashion industry. They're the ones making sure all those clothes and shoes get from the factory to the store smoothly and legally. They're like the conductors of the whole supply chain.
So it's not just about fabrics and trends, right?
No, not at all.
It's about knowing those international rules, custom stuff, all that logistics jazz.
Exactly. And the RoleCatcher Guide goes deep on the skills you need, handling all that documentation, navigating regulations, tariffs, trade agreements. It's detail-oriented, but you also need that global perspective.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And the guide mentions that 72% of the role uses administrative skills and 64% needs computer and electronics knowledge. So you got to be good with paperwork and tech.
Absolutely. Technology's changing the import-export world fast. Think about all the software for customs, online tracking, and digital platforms for working with everyone, from suppliers to customers across the world. It's this cool mix of old school trade knowledge and being super tech savvy.
Right, very cool. And the guide also points out those pros and cons of the job, right?
Yeah.
High demand, working internationally, being at the forefront of fashion, but also tough competition, long hours, fast-paced.
Yeah, it's a realistic picture. The fashion industry is booming, which means there's a huge need for good import-export specialists. But that also means more competition, tight deadlines, and sometimes unexpected hiccups. It's not for everyone.
So you got to be resilient and love solving problems. Right.
Definitely.
Okay, so now let's dive into those interview questions you shared. That's the heart of our deep dive today.
Yeah, let's break them down.
We'll look at each one, try to figure out what the interviewer's really trying to find out, and then explore some killer answers that show off your skills and experience. And of course, we'll see how RoleCatcher and its AI can help you nail those responses.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so first up, can you explain your experience in handling import and export documentation? Seems pretty straightforward, but what's the hidden meaning here?
Well, the interviewer wants to see how comfortable you are with all that nitty-gritty paperwork that's the core of international trade. They want to know if you've got experience with invoices, packing lists, certificates of origin, bills of lading, all that stuff. It's about showing them you're detail-oriented and you know how to get things done.
So even if someone hasn't managed entire shipments yet, they can still talk about specific documents they've dealt with, right?
Definitely. Or any relevant courses or internships.
What about highlighting specific software they've used?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like if you've worked with a customs brokerage system or anything like that, make sure to mention it.
And that's where RoleCatcher's AI comes in.
Hmm.
It can suggest those perfect examples from your past that match what the employer wants, right?
Yep, exactly. So you're tailoring your answers to really hit the mark.
Like having a personal interview coach.
Right.
Instead of just saying, I've handled import-export documentation, you're painting a clear picture of what you actually did, right?
Exactly. Like you could say, in my last job, I handled certificates of origin for shipments to the EU and made sure everything was perfect so there weren't any customs holdups. Way more compelling.
Way more compelling. Any pitfalls to watch out for when answering this one?
For sure. Don't exaggerate your experience, especially with systems you haven't used. Honesty is super important. And try to be concise. Focus on those key details.
Great advice. All right, question number 2. How do you stay up to date with import and export regulations? Sounds like they're checking if you're committed to learning in a field that's always changing, right?
Absolutely. Trade agreements, tariffs, safety rules, all of that stuff changes constantly. They want to see that you're proactive and can adapt.
So how should someone tackle this one?
Be specific about your sources. Mention newsletters, industry journals, trade associations, government websites, anything like that.
The RoleCatcher Career Guide actually lists some really helpful resources. Things like the International Association of Importers and Exporters and the National Customs Brokers and Forwarders Association of America.
Those are perfect examples. Showing that you've done your research and you're plugged into the industry is huge.
And I'm guessing RoleCatcher's AI can suggest even more resources based on the job, right?
Yep. Publications, websites, online courses. It can recommend anything that makes you look extra knowledgeable and ahead of the game.
That's awesome. Okay, what about things to avoid when answering this one?
Stay away from generic answers like, I just Google it, or my company keeps me updated. Those make you sound passive. Show them you're actively learning and staying on top of things.
Okay, good to know. Let's move on to question 3. How do you ensure compliance with import and export regulations? This one feels like it's all about risk management and doing things the right way.
Definitely. They're checking your understanding of the legal side of international trade and if you're committed to ethical practices.
So what would a strong answer sound like?
Talk about your process. Do you use a checklist for documents? Compliance software to track shipments? Do you stay informed about embargoes and banned products? Maybe you've done internal audits or trained colleagues on compliance. Be specific.
And RoleCatcher's AI can help here again, right? By suggesting specific compliance skills or software the employer might be interested in.
Exactly. You can make sure your answer matches their expectations and highlights those super relevant parts of your experience.
So instead of saying, I always follow the rules, you're giving specific examples of how you do it.
Exactly. You could say something like, I always double check those harmonized system codes for every product to make sure they're classified right and we're following tariff regulations.
Way more convincing. Any pitfalls here?
Don't act like compliance isn't important or someone else's job. And again, avoid vague statements like, I always follow the rules. Give real examples of how you minimize risk and stick to ethical practices.
Great points. All right, question 4. How do you manage relationships with suppliers and customers in different countries? This feels like it's about communication, understanding different cultures, and building trust across borders.
It's exactly that. Strong international partnerships are crucial in the fashion industry, so they want to see if you can build relationships, navigate those cultural differences, and communicate effectively, even with time zones and language barriers.
So how would you approach this one?
Share those wins you've had working with people from different countries. Did you negotiate a great deal with a supplier in Bangladesh? Resolve a shipping delay with a customer in France? Highlight your communication skills, your ability to adapt, and your understanding of different ways of doing business.
And I bet RoleCatcher's AI can help here too, by suggesting ways to show off your cross-cultural communication skills and your ability to build those international relationships.
Definitely. You can tailor your answer to focus on those specific cultures or business practices that are relevant to the job you're after.
Awesome. What are some things to avoid?
Don't make generalizations about whole cultures. Talk about your own experiences and the great relationships you've built. And unless they're really important for the job, don't brag about your language skills.
Great tips. Now, on to question 5. How do you manage logistics for clothing and footwear shipments? This takes us back to the heart of importing and exporting.
Exactly. It's about understanding that intricate supply chain from sourcing materials to warehousing to final delivery. They're checking your organization, problem solving, and experience with transportation, warehousing, and managing inventory.
So what makes a strong answer here?
Talk about your experience coordinating shipments, tracking inventory, and making sure things are delivered on time. Mention any software or systems you've used, like warehouse management systems or transportation management systems. And if you've negotiated good freight rates or dealt with shipping delays, those are great examples too.
And I'm guessing RoleCatcher's AI can analyze the job description and suggest those logistics skills or software the employer is looking for so you can tailor your response.
Precisely. You're highlighting the most relevant parts of your experience.
Pitfalls to avoid.
Don't get lost in jargon or overwhelm them with acronyms. Keep it clear, concise, and focus on the practical stuff.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Okay, question 6. Can you describe a time when you had to resolve a conflict related to an import or export shipment? This feels like it's all about how you handle pressure and solve problems, right?
Yep. It's a classic behavioral question. They want to see how you deal with tough situations, how you communicate, and how you stay calm and find solutions under pressure.
So how should someone tackle this one?
Pick a specific example from your experience where you had a real conflict related to a shipment. Could be a customs delay, a damaged shipment, a disagreement with a supplier, even a miscommunication with a customer. It's got to be real.
Okay, so you've got your example. How do you structure the answer?
Use the STAR method. Situation, task, action, result. Describe the situation briefly, explain what you needed to achieve, what actions you took, and what the positive outcome was. Simple and effective.
That's super helpful. And I'm sure RoleCatcher's AI can give feedback on how to make your story even more impactful.
Absolutely. It can highlight those problem-solving skills or leadership qualities they're looking for, making your answer even stronger.
Okay, pitfalls to avoid.
Don't badmouth anyone or play the blame game. Focus on the problem itself and your role in fixing it. And don't pick an example where the conflict was tiny or super easy to solve. Pick something that shows you can handle complexity.
Great tips. How do you manage the financial aspects of import and export shipments? Time to talk numbers.
This one's all about showing you're financially savvy and understand the costs involved in international trade. Can you manage budgets, analyze costs, and negotiate good deals with suppliers and freight forwarders?
So what's a good answer here?
Talk about your experience tracking expenses, comparing quotes from different suppliers and freight forwarders, and finding ways to save money. Mention if you've negotiated good payment terms or dealt with currency exchange risks. Those are all gold.
I bet RoleCatcher's AI can suggest specific financial metrics or keywords to use, right?
You bet. It can analyze that job description and suggest financial skills or industry knowledge that the employer wants to see so you can tailor your answer to highlight your expertise.
That's so cool. Any pitfalls here?
Don't be vague or avoid specific numbers. Use real examples to show off those financial management skills. And don't come across as someone who's obsessed with cutting costs, especially if it means sacrificing quality or being unethical.
Right. It's about finding that balance between saving money and maintaining standards. Okay, next question. How do you ensure quality control for clothing and footwear shipments? This seems especially crucial in fashion, where quality and brand image are everything.
Absolutely. It's about showing you're dedicated to delivering top-notch products. They want to see that you understand quality control in this specific industry and that you've got experience making sure things are done right.
So what's a good approach here?
Talk about your experience inspecting samples, setting quality standards for suppliers, and doing those pre-shipment inspections. Mention any checklists you've used or software for tracking defects. And if you've ever had to fix a quality issue, that's a great story to tell, highlighting your problem solving and commitment to customer satisfaction.
And once again, I'm guessing RoleCatcher's AI can suggest specific quality control methods or industry standards that you can mention to show off your expertise.
Oh, for sure. It can analyze the job and the company to recommend certifications, software, best practices, anything that shows you know your stuff.
That's super helpful. Any traps to avoid here?
Don't act like quality control isn't important or someone else's problem. And avoid being vague, like, I always make sure everything is perfect. Give concrete examples of what you do and the systems you use to ensure quality.
Okay, great. On to question 9. Can you describe your experience working with freight forwarders? Back to logistics, but this time focusing on a key partner in the import-export world.
Exactly. Freight forwarders handle all those tricky details of transportation and documentation, making sure those goods get from point A to point B without a hitch. They want to know you understand their role and have worked with them effectively.
So what makes a good answer here?
Highlight your experience choosing freight forwarders, negotiating rates, and staying in touch throughout the shipping process. If you've built great relationships with specific forwarders or solved any shipping problems together, those are awesome examples to share.
And I bet RoleCatcher's AI can help here by analyzing the company and job description to figure out what types of freight forwarders they use, where they ship to, and the challenges they face.
Absolutely. You can tailor your answer to their specific needs.
That's so smart. What about pitfalls?
Don't oversell your experience or act like you're an expert on every aspect of freight forwarding. Focus on what you've actually done and how well you collaborate. And even if you have, don't badmouth any particular forwarders.
Okay, great advice. Last question. How do you ensure timely delivery of clothing and footwear shipments? Time is money in the fashion industry.
For sure. This question is all about managing deadlines, anticipating delays, and finding solutions to keep those shipments on schedule.
So what's the best way to approach this one?
Focus on your proactive approach. Do you build in extra time for potential problems? Communicate clearly with everyone involved, suppliers, freight forwarders, customs brokers, the whole gang. Have you figured out ways to handle risks like weather delays or port congestion? It's all about being one step ahead.
Makes sense. And I'm sure RoleCatcher's AI can offer some final tips for structuring your answer and emphasizing your ability to meet those tight deadlines.
Absolutely. It can figure out their specific delivery needs and suggest ways to highlight your experience meeting similar deadlines or overcoming those logistical hurdles.
Amazing. Anything to avoid when answering this one?
Don't act like timely delivery isn't a big deal or something you can't control. And don't blame others for delays or make excuses. Take responsibility and show them you're a problem solver, even under pressure.
Okay, that's super helpful advice.
Of course. You want to show them you're on top of things, thinking ahead, and ready to handle whatever comes up.
Totally. And it seems like a lot of these questions are really getting at the same core skills, right? Attention to detail, communication, problem solving, and really knowing that global supply chain inside and out.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Those are like the must-haves for any good import-export specialist, especially in the fashion world where things move so fast.
Speaking of moving fast, the RoleCatcher Career Guide talks about typical career paths in this field. It says you could start as an entry-level import-export specialist, focusing on documentation and tracking. Then, with experience, you move up to a junior specialist role, managing whole import-export processes. And eventually, you could become a senior specialist, like developing strategies and leading those complex customs clearances. You could even end up managing a whole department.
It's a career with lots of potential, for sure. And those skills you learn early on, like mastering the paperwork, understanding the regulations, building relationships with suppliers, those are the building blocks for those higher level positions.
So let's say someone is just starting out, prepping for their first import-export interview. What advice would you give them?
First off, embrace those entry-level tasks. Don't be afraid to ask questions, learn from people who've been there, and take advantage of any training you can get.
I bet RoleCatcher's AI can even help with finding training programs, right? Based on what specific jobs require?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It can analyze what skills and certifications are in high demand in your area and suggest programs or online courses that can really boost your resume and make you stand out.
That's amazing. It's like having a personalized career advisor right in your pocket.
Right. And I'd also say look for ways to learn beyond your day-to-day tasks. Read industry stuff, go to webinars, network with people in the field.
The RoleCatcher Career Guide also lists some good certifications. Things like the Certified Custom Specialist, the Certified Export Specialist, and the Certified International Trade Professional.
Those are great ones to consider. They show you're serious about professional growth and can really open doors for you.
So we've talked about understanding the role, mastering those key skills, and nailing those interview questions. What about those softer skills interviewers look for? Enthusiasm, passion, really being interested in fashion.
Oh, those are super important. They want to see that you're not just going through the motions, that you're really excited about working in this industry.
How can someone show that enthusiasm in an interview without sounding fake?
Do your homework on the company and their brands. Be ready to talk about their products, who they're selling to, where they fit in the industry, and ask good questions that show you're curious and genuinely interested in their business.
So you're showing them that you're not just looking for any job, you want this job in this industry.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to let your personality come through a bit. Talk about your love for fashion, trends you've noticed, any personal experiences that connect you to this world.
That reminds me of something in the RoleCatcher Career Guide. They talk about showing off those unique skills and experiences you have, even if they're not directly related to import-export. Like highlight transferable skills, things like analytical thinking from a finance job, or strong communication skills from customer service.
Those transferable skills are gold. Employers want well-rounded people who bring something new to the table. Don't underestimate how valuable your different experiences are.
Okay, so let's say our listener has done their research, practiced their answers, and is feeling good about showing off their skills and enthusiasm. What are some practical tips for the interview itself?
First impressions matter, so dress sharp and be on time. Pay attention to your body language, make eye contact, listen carefully, and have a positive attitude. It all adds up.
Those are great points. It's also good to remember that an interview goes both ways. It's your chance to check out the company culture, the team, and the potential for growth.
Absolutely. Have a few smart questions ready to show you're curious and want to learn more about them and the role.
Like what kind of questions?
You could ask about their sustainability practices in their supply chain, or plans for expanding internationally, or their thoughts on how technology is impacting the import-export world. Asking questions that show you know your stuff and are thinking ahead, that makes a big impact.
And RoleCatcher's AI can help you come up with those killer questions, right?
It can. Based on the company and the job, it can suggest questions that show you really understand their business and share their values.
Okay, so the interview is over. What's next?
Always send a thank you note within 24 hours. Reiterate your interest and mention something specific you talked about.
And if you don't hear back right away?
Don't freak out. Hiring takes time. You can politely follow up after a week or so to see what's happening. And even if it doesn't work out, don't get discouraged. There are tons of opportunities in import-export. Use this experience to improve your resume, practice your interview skills, and keep looking.
Speaking of looking ahead, the fashion world changes so fast. How can someone stay on top of trends and make sure their skills are in demand?
Never stop learning. Subscribe to industry publications, go to webinars, connect with people on LinkedIn, join trade associations. The more you immerse yourself in the world of trade and fashion, the more opportunities you'll find.
And of course, keep using those amazing RoleCatcher tools.
Couldn't agree more. RoleCatcher is a lifesaver for anyone navigating the job market and trying to excel in their career.
Now, before we wrap up, let's tackle a question that often throws people off in interviews. What are your salary expectations? It can feel like a minefield, so how do you handle it gracefully?
It's a tough one, so prepare for it. First, do your research. Use sites like RoleCatcher, Glassdoor, or industry salary surveys to see what similar roles pay in your area, given your experience level.
RoleCatcher actually has a salary insights feature, right?
They do. It's awesome for getting a realistic idea of what you're worth. Once you've done your homework, you can give them a salary range based on your research and what you're hoping to make.
So instead of just throwing out a number, you'd say something like, based on my experience and what's typical for this role, I'm looking for a salary between.
Exactly. It shows you've thought it through and know what the market is like. And if they push for a specific number, just repeat your range and say you're flexible within that, depending on benefits and growth opportunities.
What should you avoid saying?
Don't be too specific or rigid. You don't want to rule yourself out or seem difficult to negotiate with. And definitely don't talk about your personal finances or compare yourself to others. Keep it professional and focused on what you bring to the company.
Okay, that's really helpful. Now, one last question. It usually comes up near the end. Do you have any questions for us? What are your thoughts on this one?
This is your chance to shine. Show them you're really interested, you're paying attention, and you're thinking critically about the role and the company.
So how do you make the most of this moment?
Come prepared with a few good questions. Don't ask stuff they could easily find on Google. Ask questions that show you really understand their business and the industry as a whole.
So instead of asking about the company's history, which is probably on their website, you'd suggest something more like,
Yeah, like something deeper. You can ask about their sustainability efforts and their supply chain, their plans for international growth, or how they see technology shaping the import-export process. Asking those kinds of insightful questions will definitely leave a good impression.
and I'm sure RoleCatcher's AI can help you craft those questions too, right?
Of course. Based on the company and the job, it can suggest questions that align with what they care about, their challenges, and their future goals.
Awesome. Well, I think we've covered a lot today. We've really explored what it means to be an import-export specialist in clothing and footwear, dive deep into those common interview questions, and highlighted all the cool ways RoleCatcher and its AI can help you prepare.
We've also talked about those softer skills, like showing your passion, building rapport, and asking smart questions. It's all about presenting yourself as a well-rounded candidate who's excited about this field and ready to hit the ground running.
It's like the perfect mix of analytical thinking and global awareness. Now, before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on one last thing. The import-export world is always changing. New tech, new trends, new regulations. How can someone stay ahead of the curve and make sure their skills stay relevant?
Yeah, it really is a blend of both.
Yeah.
You got to know the ins and outs of logistics and regulations, but you also need those people skills, to build relationships and handle tricky situations smoothly.
Right, it's that perfect combo of analytical thinking and being globally minded.
I like that.
Now, before we officially wrap up, let's circle back to a few key points and give our listeners some final words of wisdom. What are some of the biggest takeaways you want them to remember as they get ready for their interview?
I think the most important thing is to be yourself and let that passion come through. The import-export world, especially in fashion, is all about connecting the globe through style and business. If you genuinely love that global puzzle, that energy will be contagious.
I love that. Let your passion be your compass. And along those lines, the insights from RoleCatcher's Career Guide are so valuable for understanding what skills employers are really looking for. It's like having a cheat sheet for success.
Totally agree. And don't forget about those AI features in RoleCatcher. They can help you tailor your resume, make those interview answers even better, and even find training programs and certifications that can give you an edge.
It's like having a personal career coach and a tech-savvy assistant all in one.
Exactly. And I'd add that preparation is key. Take the time to research the company, practice your answers, think about those tough questions. The more prepared you are, the more confident you'll feel. And that confidence will really show in the interview.
Confidence is key.
Yeah.
And I think we've given our listener tons of actionable advice to help them feel prepared and ready to rock that interview.
I hope so.
Now, before we say goodbye, I wanted to leave our listener with one last thought. The import-export world is constantly evolving. With new technologies, trends, and regulations popping up all the time, how can someone stay ahead of the curve and make sure their skills are always in demand?
That's a great question. Never stop learning. Subscribe to industry publications, go to webinars, connect with people on LinkedIn. Consider getting those relevant certifications. The more you invest in yourself and your professional growth, the more valuable you'll be in this industry, especially since it's always changing.
That's such great advice. It's not just about getting the job, it's about building a fulfilling and long-lasting career in a field you love.
Exactly. And don't forget to celebrate your wins along the way. Landing a job in import-export is a big deal, so acknowledge all your hard work and effort.
Well said. We hope you found this deep dive informative, engaging, and inspiring. We're confident that with the right prep, a positive attitude, and a true passion for fashion logistics, you can totally nail that interview and launch an amazing career.
Good luck. We're cheering you on.
That's it for this deep dive. See you next time.